He understands because he cares. Yes, sir. Hey, I'm hot. It is pretty crazy. Good morning. I want to welcome everybody, those of you who are here, those of you who are on the video feed, wherever you're watching that, YouTube, Facebook, whatever you're on, welcome. We want everybody to know that we're happy that you're here. I try to throw that in every time we get together because if nothing else, we learned in 2020 the value of meeting together, and something that I think we took for granted for a long time, and we will not take for granted anymore. So, welcome. Glad you're here. We are just getting started, barely scratched the surface. So, we are going to delve in. If you have your Bibles, we're going to be in Genesis 34 this morning, and you're going to have to buckle up because this is a weird one. I tell you all the time, the one of the reasons for my understanding of the validity of the Bible is the way that it doesn't pull punches. It doesn't paint a pretty picture. It doesn't sugarcoat things. It's real. So that's where we're at this morning. When I was I'll start with a story. Hang on just a second. I'm sorry. I was coordinating rides for people to church, and now I don't have to. So, pardon me. Sorry. Now I'm going to turn that off. When I was a youth minister, I'm not going to tell you where I was, but I came to church on a Wednesday night, and as I walked in the door, I was met by a bunch of wide-eyed, frantic girls, and my teenagers, and they said, "You got to come quick! You got to come quick!" And I'm like, "Okay, somebody's bleeding, somebody's hurt, somebody's dying." As we're on our way, they say, "The Smiths have Amy, and they're in your office." Now, that's not real names. I'm changing the names. The Smiths have Amy, and they're in your office. Okay. Still, not as dramatic as they're making it out to be. So Wednesday night, I get to my office, and as I'm looking in, there is a 16-year-old girl sitting on the floor, balled up in a little ball, crying. And there's a man and a woman, parents of another student in my youth group, standing over her. And their body language is very not happy, okay? And so this is the picture that I've got. So and so I walk in and begin to, what's going on? And they start sputtering, I say, "Okay, y'all go wait outside and let me talk to her." And so they go outside. I went and got one of my other female sponsors to come in with me, and we shut and locked the door and began asking what was going on. Long story short, long story long, these two adults had deemed that this young lady's clothing was inappropriate. Now, she's wearing the exact same thing she wore to school, and so school deemed it appropriate. That doesn't necessarily mean a lot, but it wasn't school inappropriate. She was, in my opinion, not dressed inappropriately. Now, she was a 16-year-old, and her body had been developing, and so she didn't look like a 16-year-old. She looked like an 18-year-old, maybe a 20-year-old. That was part of it. But these two adults had decided that because this young lady's attire was such that she was causing their son to sin, because he was lusting, and so they were chastising and reprimanding her about her attire. And I gotta be honest with y'all. I kind of blew up a little bit, because that's nonsense. I know that that's church culture, and that's what we've taught for a long time, but that's hogwash. Okay, I'm responsible for my own sin. If I, as a male, am looking at you or your daughter or your whatever and lusting, it's not her problem, it's my problem. Because, well, that's hogwash. Let me give you another one. This is recently in a recent Washington Post article. Now, if you know anything about the world, you know that the Washington Post is not exactly the most credible news source. but that's one of the reasons I'm using this. This Washington Post article was about a story of a teenage boy who sexually assaulted a teenage girl in a bathroom in a Virginia high school. And this reporter brought out these new details, and basically his new details were some lewd, suggestive things about the young lady's history. None of it was documented. There was nothing in there that changed the facts of the matter, but he made enough suggestions that he made the case that, and he wrote this, that it wasn't rape, it was just a bad bathroom date. Yeah, and he, well, and I'll give you the reason, because if you know the Washington Post, the reason they were making that case was because the young man who was the perpetrator was gender fluid. I don't know what that means, but it meant that he could use whatever restroom he wanted to. And so they were trying to establish that it wasn't because of that, it was because of this young lady's history or whatever. My point is this. For over 50 years, no, longer than that, our society has somehow shamed victims. We like to find a way to in cases where we don't like the outcome, to make this accusation that somehow she was asking for it, that somehow she got what was coming to her. And I know this is uncomfortable talk to have, but we've got to talk about this, because that's got to stop. That's nonsense. Rape has absolutely nothing to do with sex, with the woman's attire, with the woman's history. Rape is about power and humiliation. And it's not about, the sex is just the vehicle by which that is taking place. That's not just me. You can consult psychologists, psychiatrists, textbooks, whatever. Here's where here's why we're talking about this today. Because as I started studying Genesis 34, I knew that what was in Genesis 34, but I'll give you a little. When I start studying a passage, I read it through every translation I can get my hands on, because I just want to see what other people said about it. Then I kind of write down some notes, questions that I have, or comments that I have, or things that I want to pursue. Then I go to the commentaries, and I like to pull up what other people have said about this passage. When I got to that point this week, I just kept getting mad, because just about every commentary that addressed it somehow made Dinah at fault. Now, a lot of them didn't even address it. They just kind of skipped over it. They just kind of pretended it wasn't there, because that's easier than actually addressing this. Others somehow added things to Scripture that aren't there, and made it Dinah's fault somehow that she was in some way making herself a candidate for rape. And I just got increasingly frustrated and increasingly angry, which is why I tell you all those stories, because this is not scriptural, this is cultural. And so let's read the passage. Genesis chapter 34. We're gonna dive in here, and I want you to go with me, starting at verse 1. Now Dinah, the daughter Leah had born to Jacob, went out to visit the women of the land. When Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivite, the ruler of that area, saw her, he took her and raped her. His heart was drawn to Dinah, daughter of Jacob. He loved the young woman and spoke tenderly to her. And Shechem said to his father Hamor, "Get me this girl as my wife." When Jacob heard that his daughter Dinah had been defiled, his sons were in the field with his livestock, so he did nothing about it until they came home. Now let's stop right there, because This is another instance, we've talked about this before, where commentators or preachers or theologians or whatever feel like they've got to clean up the Bible because it's very, it's not moral enough for us in our delicate understanding today. We've got to clean it up. So they add a bunch of stuff to the Bible that the Bible doesn't say. And like I said, a lot of them just skip over chapter 34 altogether and pretend like it never happened. But a lot of sources blame Dinah for the episode. They will say that she was obviously curious about life in the city, that she was obviously curious about other women, that her curiosity is a sin since it exposed her to the risk of rape. She's condemned as far back as some of the rabbinical, the ancient rabbis' interpretations of this, because they say that she didn't want to leave her prince, that she was attached to Shechem in some way. Others accuse her of going to a pagan festival, she's even given the nickname in some of these ancient rabbinical manuscripts of the Canaanite woman. A text of Jewish myth, the Testament of the Patriarchs, says that an angel instructed Levi to take revenge on Shechem. Some Jewish scholars even go so far as to say that it didn't really happen, that Dinah's story is an allegory that symbolizes the way Israelite men conducted feuds against neighboring tribes. Even the famous historian Josephus, he says that she was going to a Canaanite festival that was happening at the time. Now that's possible, but the Bible doesn't say that. We're still adding things. And so we got to get down here and look at what does it actually say. Matthew Henry is a famous commentator, and he writes, observe her vain curiosity which exposed her. She went out unknown to her father, but by the connivance of her mother to see the daughters of the land. Where are you getting all this stuff, Matthew? Because that doesn't say any of that. It does not say anything about curiosity. It does not say anything about father and mother. He goes on, probably it was a ball or some public day. So, being the only daughter, she thought herself solitary at home, having none of her own age or sex to converse with, and therefore she went abroad to divert herself. And I'm just going to stop because it's nonsense. But he goes on to say that she didn't just go to see the women; she went to see the men too. She was looking for boys. Again, none of that is textual. Not a bit of that is in the Bible. The Bible says Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, born to Leah, went out to see, depending on your translation, went out to visit the women of the land, went out to see the women of the land. That's what it actually says. In 1997, as recently as that, a novelist, Anita Diamant, reimagined Dinah's story in her novel, The Red Tent. I don't know if you heard of that, but it was a bestseller and a big deal. But she makes this whole story into like a Hallmark movie, where Dinah and Shechem have this Romeo and Juliet love affair, and she goes to escape and to live with her love, and that's all fine and good. The red tent became a worldwide phenomenon. The problem is that, again, it's not there. It's not in the text. We're making stuff up and we're adding stuff. Now Dinah, the daughter Leah had born to Jacob, went out to visit the women of the land. Now, the translation here is vague because the Hebrew is vague. And so, just like if I say, I went to see Tim, It could mean that I went to visit with Tim, to converse with Tim, to talk to Tim. It could also mean I went to look at Tim and see what Tim was doing. Because we use that word in different ways. If we say, I went to see my cousins, a lot of times in East Texas redneck vernacular, we mean I went to visit my family. But it could just as easily literally mean I went to see what they were doing. It's the same thing here. The Hebrew is vague because it could mean either one. It could mean, that's where they get this idea that she was curious and wanting to look. It could mean that she went to just go see what other women were doing. That's possible. It could also mean that these were people that she was already acquainted with that she was going to visit. It could mean either one. Commentators make the case that she's the only daughter. We don't know that either, because just because there are not more girls named does not mean more girls weren't born. Dinah is named because of what happens to Dinah in Genesis 34. Not because necessarily she's the only girl. Girls would not have been named because in that society, we've talked about this before, a female child wasn't valuable. A female child didn't really take on any value until she got married. And so they wouldn't have listed those when they were listing children. So the fact that they're not listed doesn't mean anything. Now, what we miss, the way this happens, jumping from 33 to 34, we miss that they've probably been settled here for a length of time. This is not Jacob settled down, they pitched their tent, and Dinah took off. They've been here for a length of time, which to me, personally, and I always try to tell you that when this is Jeff's opinion, to me, that lends more credence to the going to visit people she already knew idea. Because she'd been here for a length of time, she wasn't necessarily just scoping things out. She could have been. I don't know. And that's why I get suspicious of some of these that tell you they know exactly and they're going to add all these things to it, because they don't know either. And you got to admit that. Personally, I think Dinah was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And so I will concede that she did leave her home. She did leave her home obviously without the knowledge or the accompaniment of any of the men in her home. And in that culture, in that time, that wasn't a good idea. It's not like here where, ladies, you can go to the grocery store, or you can go conduct your business, or you can go. A woman out was fair game. And so there's a little bit of maybe childhood foolishness, okay? I'll give her that. But nothing that justifies the blame that she gets in a lot of these commentaries, okay? I don't think she was sinful or evil or wrong or in any way deserved what happened to her. I think she may have done something stupid, and that still doesn't justify what happened to her. So bottom line, Dinah didn't bring this on herself. There's no evidence, there's no scriptural evidence that Dinah brought this on herself. And so in that, I take this as an opportunity to say that we've got to stop. We as not just the church, but 21st century America, we've got to stop in any way insinuating that women are somehow responsible for the perversions of men in any way, okay? And that's just it's like when we say, well, the clothes she wore caused this to happen. It's like our guns don't kill people argument, okay? Guns don't kill people. A gun doesn't kill a person by themselves, right? Okay, a miniskirt doesn't rape people or whatever. Does that make sense? Just because that's not a justification. Now, we still do it. You still hear boys will be boys. And no. No, that's not boys being boys. And you heard me criticizing the Washington Post. I'll criticize the other side of the aisle. We as Christians don't need to justify when some of our politicians say things that are inappropriate as locker room talk. That's not okay, because I've been in a lot of locker rooms, and locker room talk is hand me a towel. And so if that's your locker room talk, you need to get out of that locker room, because that's not okay. And so I think we've got to be the ones to stand up in our culture and say, hey, this is not okay. I don't care whether you're Republican or Democrat. I don't care which side of the aisle you're on. It's not okay. And it's not okay to well, I'll give you this. This happened last weekend. Somebody asked me if I was concerned, not as a minister, but as a parent, that our youth minister candidate wasn't married. Because, you know, he's going to be an unmarried young man working with teenage girls. And I said, you know, I was an unmarried youth minister, and that wasn't a problem. You go look at the statistics of youth ministers who get involved in inappropriate relationships, and just look at the stats, look at the numbers. It is generally more married youth ministers than single. Because it doesn't have anything to do with your marital status. It has to do with your heart. You're not, again, we can't blame the perversion that would cause somebody to be attracted to a teenage girl to be based in any way on her or on their other factors. So, we know that there's an amount of time that's occurred between Genesis 33 and 34. Most of the children are grown. Dinah is here, well, scholars argue on how old she is. Some people say as old as 18, others as young as 12. In that society, the marrying age for a girl was 12 years and a day. And I'm not saying it's right, I'm just telling you the way it was. 12 years and a day makes, so the fact that nobody questions if she's marrying age means that she's at least over 12 years and a day. The fact that if she was 18 and unmarried, that would have been a big deal, makes me think that she's not that old. I think she's somewhere, this is just Jeff's opinion, but probably around 13 or 14 years old at this point. So, now again, we're thinking 13 or 14-year-old. A 13 or 14-year-old wanting to go visit with the women of the land, that makes a little more sense, right? It's not like she's out looking for trouble. She's a typical teenager. She's curious. She wants to see what's going on. She wants to go visit people. She wants to go talk to, I don't know. You know, some people say that scholars, theologians, whatever you want to call them, they make the case that throws in her mother because her mother was more outgoing or something, and so Dinah therefore must have been more like her mother. I don't buy that. I think it's a lineage thing, but it could be. It could be. I'll concede that it's possible. We've talked about how the verb to see means a couple of different things. And there are a couple of different ways to translate that. The verb used here, it can mean to observe. It can also mean to visit. Or it could be a play on verse 2 where Shechem saw her. That's the same verb that's used there. There's much debate over whether Shechem took her by force or if it was some sort of illicit romance. Some scholars argue that the problem here is that Shechem had intercourse with her without following due procedure, without the correct formalities, that it was more about sex outside of marriage. Again, I don't buy that because the biblical term is it literally, they didn't have a word that meant rape, but it literally means forced. It means, it's not, I think we're trying to clean up Scripture. Okay.
When it says he took her.
Yes.
And, I mean, that to me, that signifies she didn't have the choice in the matter.
Yes, I agree with you. I think we're trying to clean up Scripture because we don't like what it says. Even when they redid it, the Revised King James changed it to he lay with her and violated her. Now, again, they're still giving you the idea of violation, but it softens it a little bit. I think it's rape. The Revised Standard Version and several others translate it as he humbled her. Again, I think we're cleaning it up. I think it is what it is. So the text is clear. Dinah was raped. She may have made a mistake by leaving the camp. We don't know. She could have left the camp in the company of other women. We don't know. But she probably shouldn't have left the camp. Now, on the flip side, in that society, the responsibility for taking care of Dinah as a 13, 14, even 15-year-old girl fell on both Jacob and the oldest brother. Remember when they go to get a wife for Isaac, who do they negotiate with? They negotiate with her father and Laban, her oldest brother. Because that's who's responsible in the culture. And so the fact that Dinah is just unattended, that nobody's worrying about her, that nobody's being responsible for her. I mean, you can make as much of a case that the men were not doing what they were supposed to do as you can that Dinah was not doing what she was supposed to do. Yes, Dinah should not have left the camp. She should not have went into the village, period. But somebody should have known where Dinah was and what she was doing. So there's blame on both sides. Again, none of that justifies what happened to her. Whether it was whether she shouldn't have left the camp or whether they should have been paying more attention, the responsibility for what happened to her squarely falls on Shechem, because he's the one that does the deed. Now, I want us to notice the progression here, because we'll see this again and again throughout Scripture. And even into the New Testament, James 1, if you remember James 1, verse 14 and 15, you remember that passage? Each person is tempted when they're dragged away by their own evil desires and enticed. Then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. The same progression that we see there in James happens here to Shechem. He saw her, he took her, and he raped her. Desire leads to sin, leads to death. It's the same thing James is talking about. And if we really want to go and spread the blame all around, we can argue that Dinah's desire leads her to be where she's not supposed to be. Again, without blaming her. So let's talk about that, because we've made this case, and I that was important to me to make that case, but we've kind of made that point. Let's talk about this progression, okay? James says desire, our own evil desire, causes us to be enticed, and that enticement leads us to sin, and that sin leads to death. So how do we, as Christians, as followers of Jesus, how can we keep from being dragged away and enticed by our own evil desires? We're going to have desires. So the idea that I'm just not going to have those desires, that's a nice statement, but it's not realistic. We're going to have desires. And the temptation itself is not sin. To be tempted is human. You're going to be tempted. It's what you do with that temptation. So how can we keep from being dragged away and enticed by our own evil desires? Jason?
I think you have to be strong enough in your heart and in your mind to not act on those temptations or desires. There's a lot of people in this world that, and as we all know, that act on that and then do something horribly wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that we have to be, as Christians, I think we have to be
Yeah. Jason says for those of you at home that we need to be strong enough in our own convictions, in our own will, for lack of a better word, to be able to identify. Is that fair? Identify those things that are going to drag me away and entice me, and to stand up to those, and really to not put myself in that situation. I'm adding to what you said, but because everybody's temptation is different. The thing that might tempt me might not tempt you. And so it's real easy for me to judge you on whatever it is that your sin is when I'm not tempted by that. But I don't like to talk about my own. You know what I mean? It's one of the reasons why you'll hear a lot of sermons in churches on homosexuality, but not many on gluttony or gossip. Because we like to talk about sins that we don't struggle with. We don't like to talk about the ones that we might actually have a problem with ourselves. Doug, is your hand up?
Shifting blame is a fundamental thing. Even when we were kids. Well, it wasn't my fault.
Let me catch them up at home. Doug said shifting blame is a problem even when we're kids. It wasn't my fault. I didn't do it. Go ahead.
And then you see also in Islam that has taken itself into another whole level because they make the women get completely covered. In some societies in Islam, they only have eye holes in their covering, and everything is covered big sheets. It's just,
And they blame the women.
and it's the women's fault,
Mm-hmm.
and that's part of their practice.
Yep. And he said even when you get into Islam, they have it's even further with this idea of shifting blame, that it's the women's fault, and they will have women completely covered with nothing but an eye hole, and because it's a woman's fault and I would say even in those Islamic countries where they have those kind of rules, they still have sexual assaults. Because it doesn't matter that she's completely covered and that nothing's showing but her eyes. Because, again, the sexual assault has nothing to do with what she's wearing. Jerry?
I heard a preacher say one time that when you're tempted, you need to realize it's going to get you in trouble. You need to run from it.
Jerry said he heard a preacher say once, when you're tempted, you need to realize it and realize it's going to get you in trouble and run from it. I think that's good advice. Yeah, because I know the things that tempt me, right? I know that, we can't have, Thanksgiving's coming up, I'll give you a perfect example. And I was talking about gluttony, I'll tell you, we can't have a whole farmhouse peanut butter pie in my house. And y'all laugh, but I'm serious, because I can't just eat a slice. I'll eat a slice, but I'll eat all of it because y'all, we joke about this, but that gluttony's still a sin. It's still a sin so I got to put that away from me. And it sounds innocent and we like to laugh about it, but it's not, because it's still sinful. And that little bit where I say, well, it's just Thanksgiving. I'm going to put on my stretchy pants. And it'll be all right, and I'll get back on the wagon. We do that with every kind of sin imaginable, And oh well, it's just one drink, or oh well, it's just you know what I'm talking about. Whatever it is that you're struggling with, oh well, a little bit. And Jerry's right. I need to realize that this is a temptation for me. This is something that I struggle with, and I need to stay away from it. I saw another hand. I'm ranting. Kim. Well, no, we can't stay away from food. That's true. And I have to still find ways to control myself. And so I can't, again, I'm shifting blame. I'm going to blame it on the pie. But it's not the pie that's the problem. It's Jeff. Kim, you had your hand up. Mm-hmm. No, I think you're exactly right. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me catch y'all up at home. Kim said that it seems like a moot point, but prayer and praying about whatever it is, praying that God give me strength, praying that God helps me through it, praying that offering it up. I think that's absolutely right, because it brings God into the picture. It's not, I mean, we can talk about self-control and all that stuff, and yes, that's important, but ultimately, if I could live a sinless life, I should have already done it, right? I need some outside power to help me, because I can't do that. Jason.
Celebrate Recovery is a faith-based program for all hurts, habits, and hang-ups. I go every Tuesday night, except for Brothers in Christ on Tuesdays, but that's a good way to overcome your hurts, habits,
Good.
any kind of temptation.
Jason says Celebrate Recovery is a faith-based program that is for all, what did you say? Hurts, habits, and hang-ups. I like that. And he goes every Tuesday, and he recommends that. And truthfully, we used to have it here. I'm going to put in a plug. If you are interested to be able to host that, we have to have a male and a female. And we have a male leader who is ready to do that, but we don't have a female leader. And so if you are a woman and you would like to assist with that, take that on. Talk to me at some point, email me something, and I'll get you connected with the people that need to be connected. Steve, your hand's up. Oh, contact Steve. Okay. I didn't want to throw you out there without talking to you. That's, you don't just volunteer people for stuff. So after the rape, Shechem puts Dinah in his house and asks his father to arrange a marriage. Now, there's a lot of stuff goes in here. I told you some people say that she was there willingly, that she didn't leave. We don't know whether this was under guard or whether this was kidnapping or what. Shechem spoke to his father saying, "Get me this young woman as a wife." And then Jacob hears about it and says, literally, he kept his peace until his sons came home. Hamor and Shechem then come to visit Jacob to talk to him and to try to convince him to allow Shechem to marry Dinah. I think you can see here that Hamor knew that a wrong had been committed. Hamor knew that something was wrong. And somehow, maybe, I don't know, there's one commentator who postulates that Hamor didn't have enough people or ability to overpower Jacob's entourage and had to negotiate. Again, we're adding things to it. We don't know it doesn't say that. Some people try to say, well, look, Shechem acted honorably afterwards. No. The abuser always acts honorably afterwards and tells you it's not ever going to happen again, and he's sorry, or she's sorry, or whatever. But that doesn't change the fact. We're running out of time, but let's run through, because news of this spreads quickly, and when her brothers find out, it's a lot different than when Jacob finds out. Basically, if you read the chapter, the sons of Jacob tell Hamor and Shechem, "Sure, we'll make a deal with you. You want to marry my sister, you can marry my sister, but y'all all need to be circumcised." And so Shechem's ready to go. Yeah, I'm ready. And so they agree to that. They agree to be circumcised. Now, this is not like 21st century medicine. This is a nasty thing. I mean, we're talking flint knives, you know, you get the picture. I'm not going to go any more detail, but so it's then after they've all done it, they are weak. They are vulnerable, and the brothers take advantage of that, and basically they kill everybody. Simeon and Levi, two of Dinah's brothers, jump in, and they plunder the town. They kill everybody. And again, that the Bible doesn't justify that action. They're just as condemned as Shechem is. Because what they did is still wrong. Revenge doesn't make the sin go away. It didn't change anything. God says, vengeance is mine. We know that, right? And we like to talk about that. Norma?
It almost sounds like they actually kidnapped her too, because she's still there.
I think they kidnapped her. That's my personal opinion. Again, I'm trying to walk a real straight line here and not do what I get onto everybody else for and add to it. But I think they kidnapped her because I don't think that she was allowed to leave. There's no evidence that her and Shechem had any kind of relationship before this. And so the way it is written to me, it's like he saw her for the first time. He saw her, he took her, he raped her, and then he kept her in his house until he could go get permission for her to be his legally. That's what it sounds like to me. Now, again, I'm not trying to add anything to Scripture, but I think she was kidnapped. I think they were justified in at least going to get her. But there was something. The brothers' reaction is a little bit over the top. They didn't have to kill everybody. This is like a Western or a kung fu movie, or those where the I don't know, y'all didn't watch those, but that's what it reminds me of. It's just the revenge movies that used to be a big deal. Basically, as we're looking to assign blame, and let's wrap this up. We're looking to assign blame for everything that happens here. I think the blame goes back to Jacob. Jacob, when he is talking to God, when he's coming back, is told to go back to the place where he met God. He should have went to Bethel, to the one that he named Bethel when he first talked to God. That's where he should have went. Now, he told Esau he was going one way and he went a different way, because we keep coming back to this. Jacob is having a relationship with Yahweh. He is changing, but he's still Jacob. And he's still lying. He's still being deceitful. I think he got to this place, and it was easier to stay here. I mean, remember, at that time, he's got a ton of livestock. He's got a ton of kids and this whole entourage that he's trying to move, and it's easier to go to this place and set up camp here because it's close to the city, everything's good, than to actually go back to where God told him to go. And so, we go back and you'll hear commentators, well, what would have happened if Dinah wouldn't have left? Or what would have happened if the brothers would have... Well, what would have happened if Jacob had done what God told him to do? If Jacob would have went to Bethel, you could make the case that none of this would have happened. If he would have just gone and done what God told him to do, and there's your sermon right there. If we just do and follow what God says for us to do, God's not trying to take away our fun. He's not trying to make us miserable or jump through a bunch of hoops. He's simply saying, if you live like this, your life's going to be a lot better than if you don't. So we're going to leave it right there because we're a little bit over time. Thank you. I know I preached too much today, and I'm sorry, but this one was one that we had to wrestle with. So thank you for your attention. Thank you for your participation. We got about 12 minutes, and then we'll be